Hi, welcome to Senior Moment, Successful Aging. I'm Mary Beals-Ludka, your host. I work for Area Agency on Aging at NACOG, and you can reach us toll-free at 877-521-3500. Senior Moment, Successful Aging is sponsored by the Division of Lifelong Learning at Yavapai College and Area Agency on Aging at NACOG. Again, welcome to Senior Moment. I'd like to welcome our guest today, and our guest today is Jonathan King. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate you spending some time with us today. You're the Spiritual and Bereavement Coordinator with Hospice of the Pines.
Yes, that's correct.
I'd like to start out a little bit talking about where you come from and how you came to be in the position you're in.
Well, sure. Well, actually, I grew up in the Prescott area. And so about a year ago, my family moved back after changing a little bit of my career. I'd been a pastor in local churches for about 17 years. And so moving into the hospice world was just a real natural extension of that, in a way that I found that I could use my strengths, and really discovered that it's a great place to be.
It is a great place to be, and we're really lucky to have you here.
Thank you.
And back in your own community. And you know, Hospice of the Pines is one of several hospice that are available in our area. And I think a lot of people have a fear of, what does hospice mean? What is hospice? Does that mean I'm that's it? You know, so
right.
You maybe just explain a little bit, what does hospice mean?
Well, you know, a lot of people think of hospice in the last moments, in the last days. And actually, hospice, the best time for hospice to come in is when somebody's been given a 6-month diagnosis. And the doctors and the patients and the family, they all agree that, that there isn't going to be a cure. And so, at that point, that's where hospice comes in and starts focusing on providing comfort. And what's unique about hospice versus all the other medical world is that it provides a comprehensive care. So you get someone who's watching out for your spiritual care, and you get someone who's taking care of grief support, and you get a CNA, and you get a nurse, and you get a doctor, and you have social work active, and you have volunteers who are working. And as a team, we all work together to develop a care plan in order to provide the best needs. Or the best care during that very special time. And it is a special time, because you want those last times with a family member, or even as the patient who's going through that time, to be able to have the opportunity to end well.
You know, and make choices.
And make choices. That's very true.
And I think that's, you know, one of the things we were talking about earlier is making those independent choices and planning ahead is really, really important part of it as well.
Yeah.
And in your counseling, I believe you talk about advanced planning too.
Yes. Our hospice social workers can actually provide education, but also with any of our patients, immediately they start doing what they can to make sure all that advanced planning is everything is in place. Because you don't want to be trying to make those decisions when life is getting really tough. Yeah. You know, you don't want to do that in crisis. So we always encourage people in the community, and the outreach that we do in the community is really an effort to try to help people make those decisions on their own when they have their full abilities, when they're not in crisis, so that they can understand what's going on and make just clear-headed decisions.
Yeah, when you're not feeling well, it's not a good time to be making decisions.
No, and most people don't want to.
No.
Most people just want to leave me alone and just make me feel better.
Leave me alone, make me feel better. And we were talking also earlier about sometimes you think you've made decisions and you think you've laid things out. So does the Hospice of the Pines also, like you were saying, you do outreach to the community about what does that mean to make decisions, and what are all the little steps that you need to think about?
Yeah, there's a lot of different avenues and different tools that we can use. But one of the things, just my personal experience so far, is you have to anticipate every possible situation. And so sometimes when you just create a template, get a legal template and fill in the name, it might not answer all of the questions. And then there's other things that aren't even legalities. We do a program called 5 Wishes, where it fills in the gaps where the legal stuff might not, of basically the gaps that are present in a living will. And questions like, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want your funeral to go? What do you want people to say about you? What's your top goals as you're ending your life and going through this season? And so there's some of those things that families struggle to talk about. Mm-hmm. Because no one likes talking about death, and especially adult children, they don't want to say goodbye to mom and dad. And so to be able to have the opportunity for the parent to initiate those conversations makes it a lot easier on the rest of the family. And so having a tool like the 5 Wishes it initiates it and guides them through it, so that very quickly they can make their wishes known, and there's a place for witness signs, and so there is a formality to it, mm-hmm. of saying, yeah, this is really what I want. So
you can do like a spiritual will, too, and say, these are my words of wisdom that I want to pass on.
Yeah.
Also, I've seen people use it for that, and I think that's important. Sometimes it is hard, and I think that is one of the most difficult audiences is the adult children. Mm-hmm. A lot of the clients that we work with is like, my kids don't want to talk to me. Who do I talk to? How do I approach that subject?
Right.
And getting that information in your outreach is really important, because how do you broach that subject? And they're like, oh, Mom, I don't want to talk about it right now.
Right.
Don't want to talk about it.
Well, and, denial is really strong.
Yeah.
And, it's not uncommon to even see family members at the deathbed saying, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. And really, the patient knows. Mm-hmm. Usually it's not the patient who's in denial sometimes, but usually not. Usually it's the family member who's really struggling just to accept it. But that's why in hospice we provide 13 months of follow-up after the patient dies.
I didn't know that.
Of grief support. And we do that through regular phone calls and through mailings, and by providing support groups in the community, or even one-on-one counseling with a bereavement coordinator like myself, or another chaplain or a social worker. And we provide that because often people aren't ready when it happens.
Right.
And so they think, all right, I'm going to get through this. And in those first weeks, they're just so busy making preparations with the funeral and dealing with Social Security, or putting all the paperwork in place. And then one day it just hits them. And it's a lot harder than they ever anticipated. And so to be able to have that constant support and avenues for people to seek out help through hospice, I think that's one of the huge pieces to what we offer, versus what most people are going to experience, in most healthcare, experiences.
Well, and as you mentioned healthcare several times, and I think hospice is an important piece as we look at healthcare moving in the future. It's not all about medical.
Correct.
And you've gotten that for a long time.
Right.
But the rest of the world's kind of coming along with the fact that it's also about, it's mind, body, spirit. Mm-hmm. It's about prevention, and it's about palliative care.
Right.
That's part of healthcare, and it's not just medicine.
Correct.
And so I think that's an important point to bring out. I know that one of the things you wanted to talk about today in particular was the loss of a spouse, and the issues that come up when you're working, especially, just with any couple, when you lose your spouse and you've been together a year or a long time. My daughter is a widow. They were married 7 years. She went through these same things. So, talking about, I think one of the things you mentioned was identity.
Yeah. Just imagine being with the same person in your life for 50, 60 years. Yeah. That most of your life has been framed by that relationship. Mm-hmm. And how people know you, your relationships, your children, you finish each other's sentences, your activities are all built around each other. Yeah. And then one day that other person isn't there. And so when a spouse loses their husband or wife, one of the consistent things I see with those who I work with, eventually they have to come to terms with what is their new identity. Mm. I was just up in Sedona and speaking to a woman who, that was her first question. Her husband's been gone for a few months, and she's already to that point of saying, who am I?
Yeah.
And that was her question, who am I? And when people are asking that question, you have to be able to recognize that that is a part of the grief. Is that as they are coming to that point where they're accepting the loss, the next obvious question is what is life now? And I believe that one of the key things that people need to deal with is what's their purpose. And it's a time that can be really exciting, because now they can start thinking about life a little bit differently. Maybe there's an old dream that they had put aside for a long time that now they're going to pick up again. Others, it might just simply be that there's old connections they want to make, that they just haven't had time to do because they've been the caregiver for such a long time, especially when there's spouses that suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's, where the disease is a long period of time.
A long time.
And their whole life becomes taking care and being that faithful spouse to the end. And then it's, again, who am I? So to be able to walk them through that process of asking, trying to give them freedom to speak about their old dreams or their skills that maybe they put on the side, or, it's really about focusing on the end result more than the task. What is the result of the work you want to do? And then usually you can find a way in the community or in their life to encourage them to go after that.
And there's a lot of opportunities in the Prescott area for
Absolutely.
Volunteering, for learning new things. Yavapai College has amazing programs, Division of Lifelong
Right.
Learning.
Right.
So it never stops. And, we were talking earlier too, the loss steps are similar with any loss, really. And one of the ones I've seen is anger in the beginning. But it seems like when they get to that, who am I, then they're moving into a healthier spot. But
Right.
you still have to go through that anger
Right.
sometimes. Some people it's long, some are short.
Right, yeah, the beginning of the grief process, it's hard.
Yeah.
It hurts. And I've had some people describe it as this, this doesn't hurt like this, it doesn't hurt like this, it doesn't hurt like this. This is a totally different, deep hurt. When I wake up in the morning and the spot next to me is empty. And one of the hardest things for people to hear is it's okay for it to hurt, it should hurt, and you just have to go through it. And that's that's one of those issues that I commonly hear from people, is that they get to the point where they are still hurting, and the people around them, their family members or friends, they're ready to move on. And so they're the ones having to say, I need to find another outlet to go talk to people because no one else wants to talk to me anymore. But it's every single person, their grief process is different. The length of time, some get angry, some get withdrawn, but that's where the strength of the support groups are, where a group of people can come together to a safe place and they can tell each other the exact same stories and bawl with each other every single time, and no one gets tired of it because they all know where each other's at. And as people go through the process, and then there's someone new comes who's on the front end of the process, those folks become the encouragers of being able to say, we know exactly what you're feeling, but we're a year down the road and it does get better. And sometimes that's just the hope that they need.
And when we're talking about expectations of the family sometimes is very difficult. So it's wonderful that hospice includes the family in at least that beginning counseling, because I've seen instances like, well, it's been 2 months now, you should be over it.
Right.
And they've never gone through that level of grief and they don't understand. So the support groups are key.
Yeah.
Very, very important. How long is the average person stay in the support group, or there is no average?
There is no average.
There's no
I haven't been
average.
able to figure out a pattern.
Okay.
I know some folks, they really encourage each other to go to multiple groups around town because they need that kind of rebuilding of it, and because that identity issue, a part of the identity is the relational connection. Because so many of them have been interconnected as couples, their social circles aren't really there. And so the support groups also become a way in which they reconnect with people and start building friendships. But some people just use support groups as that's the place I can always go on a bad day. And they show up, and they'll be there, and they'll get the help they need, and then they'll be gone for 2 months. And then they'll show up again and say, okay, I need some maintenance check. I'm struggling again. I wasn't expecting this trigger. I saw this movie, or I heard this song, or I went on this trip, and it took me to a place I wasn't expecting on going. And so it's just that constant tool, in their toolbox that they can always go to help them. And then others, they're the constants. And I'd say that most people in that 1 year or 2 year spots, they really are beginning to deal with the acceptance and the identity of, okay, I've gone through all the tough things of the first year, all the holidays and all the birthdays and all the firsts, and I've proven to myself I can do this. Okay, so from that point on, usually they start dealing with the other things of what does my life really look like now? Mm-hmm. What do I want it to be?
What I want it to look like. So how do we get a hold of you at Hospice of the Pines?
Well, our phone number is 928-632-0111.
So what are the steps in getting involved with hospice? You mentioned the diagnosis, but how does someone, do we just call you up and ask questions and you help guide us through that? And how does that process work?
Well, there's a few different ways. Sometimes it's initiated by the doctor, and it'll be the doctor that says, I think it's time that you talk to hospice. And that's great when that's happening, because we have to have the doctor's orders to go too far down the road. But you can always call us, and we'd be glad to come out to you, and we'll do it immediately. Now you can call us 24 hours a day, and our on-call nurses will be able to answer a lot of questions. Illness doesn't have a timetable. It's not office hours. And so sometimes when people are getting the bad news, it's in the middle of the night, at the hospital, and they don't want to wait till morning. They need to talk to someone. And so they're welcome to call our phone number, and they'll be the message will be given to a on-call nurse, and that nurse will call back, and we'll start the process of being able to give them education, explain the parameters, explain what the diagnoses are that accepts the hospice has to have to accept them, and we'll start the evaluation process. There's multiple different routes, but ultimately the family member or the patient can always call.
And that's nice to know that it's 24 hours.
24 hours.
7 days a week.
Yep.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I imagine you spent some time coordinating with the hospital as well, and the nursing homes. Yeah,
and we try to develop a strong relationship with the group homes and the assisted living and the hospitals, and they're also one of the places where they'll call us, or at the hospitals they should usually give a list of here's 3 or 5 different hospices in the area.
And some people are concerned about cost, and how does that work?
Well, if you're on Medicare covers all of it.
See, that's huge.
So there is no cost.
Okay.
And usually the few things that there might be considered a small co-payment, most hospices just take care of that. They just build it into their model, their business model.
So if it's in your business model and you're paid for Medicare, but do you also do some fundraising for people who'd like to give back to you? I know that my mother-in-law gave back to the hospice that helped her. Yeah,
most hospices are for-profit, but they have a nonprofit arm because of that, because because the service was so meaningful to them that they want to give back. And so we have a Hope and Care Foundation is what ours is called. And that foundation will fund specific needs within the community of both individuals and other nonprofits. And so that's one way to do that. But every hospice has a team of volunteers. It's actually a Medicare requirement that a certain percentage of our services provided come from volunteers. And part of that's the history of hospice. It was started off 100% volunteers. And so there's that philosophy that we're trying to stick to. But that's the other way to give back, is often when people are figuring out their identity and their purpose, what they find out is they enjoyed being the caregiver. And they understand how hard it is to go through death. with a loved one. And so it'll often be a volunteer who goes and sits with the patient when the family can't, or needs a break and needs to go, grocery shopping. And that volunteer will develop that relationship with the patient. And then we have vigil volunteers that, when we believe that they're in the last hours, the last 2 days, our vigil volunteers will make sure that the patient's never alone. And they'll sit all through the night, to make sure that somebody is there with the patient when they pass.
And that, I myself have been through that many times as an old nurse, and it is a very special time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a fear, that people don't want to be alone.
Right.
And that's a huge way to give back, is to be, and I like that name, vigil. Yeah. Volunteer. Now, I know you provide training, and I think that's important for the listeners today to know that here's an opportunity to be engaged in the community, and I know you do an extensive training.
We do extensive training, and our volunteers are certified hospice volunteers at the end of the training, and I forget how many hours total it is, but
we won't hold you to it.
Thank you. But it's extensive, it's comprehensive, and at the end, they should have all the tools they need to go and sit down, and our volunteer coordinator will look at the family situation and the needs of the patient, because the patient can say, I'd really like to talk to another guy.
Yeah.
And so we will match another man up with that person, or we'll see commonalities, as they're both veterans, or they both have similar interests or faith backgrounds, or and so we'll try to take real attention to what's going to be the right niche relationally, for the patient, and also for the volunteer. So there's a lot of opportunities.
And do they call the same number if they'd like to be interested
call
in
the same
volunteering?
Number, and ask for our volunteer coordinator.
My other question too is on the support groups. Let's say I'm listening to the show and I'm thinking, wow, I'm going through this grief. Can I still drop in on the support group even though I haven't gotten hospice from you, or is that
absolutely? It's open to the public.
That's nice.
And we have groups. Hospice of the Pines. We're the only hospice that covers 100% of Yavapai County.
Excellent.
So that means the very outer reaches of Seligman. In the middle of nowhere, we'll go there. Now, sometimes we have to borrow four-wheel drives and to get to the places we have to go, and then the other outer reach of Congress to Black Canyon City, Sedona, we cover it all, and so that's a far reach. And so our support groups, we have a support group on Wednesdays up in Sedona at the Sedona United Methodist Church. We have a mayor support group on Tuesdays at the Mayor Senior Center, Prescott. We have Monday night at the Senior Center, and we have Prescott Valley Tuesday afternoon support group, and we have a new support group going to be starting up out of Pronghorn Ranch I think a Thursday evening. And so we're always looking for opportunities to build partnerships with the community and make sure that that's open to wherever the people are at.
That's really nice to know, because I can see hearing this and saying, well, I didn't get hospice, but boy, I could use somewhere to go and be able to have an outlet to speak about my feelings. Now, do you yourself run some of the support groups? Or
I
all
run
of them?
3 of the support groups right now.
Okay.
And then some of our master social workers cover some of the others, and other chaplains will cover some of the others too. So some of it's based on where we live and where we're at and our time availability, but all of us are passionate about helping people. And
and I think that's just amazing that you cover the whole county, because I know in our services we can't. I can't get folks to go out to Wilhoit or Yarnell, and that's just key, because we have a lot of folks that do live in the hinterland, so to speak, and so that's a wonderful service that you give.
And we are a rural community, and so you have to take the challenges with that. But most people they want to die in their home.
Yes.
And it's way more comfortable than a nursing home, and a better setting. And so we so believe in that we're willing. That's why we're willing to go the farthest reaches. And it's not always easy,
No.
but but we believe that that's the best place for them.
Excellent. That's an excellent service. So, is there anything that I haven't covered before we wrap it up today about the services from the Hospice of the Pines and about you yourself?
No, I think that's pretty good oversight.
Okay.
I just encourage anyone, if you have any questions, or even if you want to know about maybe how you can help out with hospice, Hospice of the Pines, we'd be glad to talk with you. We have a full team on all different aspects, so we'd love to have the opportunity to speak with you.
And remembering that, hospice is also about that palliative care in the mind, body, soul, that it's all connected.
Yeah.
And, when we talk about successful aging, it's about successful living, and dying is part of living.
Yeah.
And it's part of the cycle, and it's important to talk about it and be open about it. So I really, really appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you.
All right, Jonathan King. Thank you very much again. And
Thanks.
thank you very much for joining us today. And if you have any questions, again, I failed to introduce our new producer, Nancy Bennett. And she is your contact if you have any questions about today's show. Number you missed, and her number is 717-7607. And she's with the Division of Lifelong Learning at Yavapai College. So welcome, Nancy. I'm looking forward to working with her as we move forward in the future. Again, thank you, Jonathan, for being with us, and thank you all. This is Senior Moment, Successful Aging. Until next time.